Hello everyone, today we are talking about the Baldurs Gate Gazetteer, which is on D&D Beyond, and that actually is coming from a previous project, Descent into Avernus. If you are interested, after you've been playing Baldur's Gate 3, you want to know more about Baldur's Gate, this is one of the perfect ways to learn a bunch of lore, a lot of the characters, and kind of the layout of one of the most famous D&D cities. So I'm here with Chris Perkins.
Hello!
What all do we find in the Gazetteer?
Well, okay, so you mentioned that this was originally appearing in the book product, Baldur's Gate Descent into Avernus. The Gazetteer was designed to give DMs, Dungeon Masters, a city that they can basically run and customize for their game. So the Baldur's Gate Gazetteer contains enough information about the city that you can bring it to life in a game. And so there's information, just a little bit of information about the city's history, because it actually has a very interesting history, tracing back to pirates and all kinds of pirate shenanigans. It tells you, who the city was named after. And then it gets into what makes the city unique. What is it about Baldur's Gate that is interesting and inviting and scary and fun? Some people call it the city of blood. Some people call it the city of murder. Why do they call it these things? The Gazetteer helps explain why. At the same time, there's a lot going for Baldur's Gate. And so this Gazetteer is really trying to capture the best and worst elements of the city to paint a picture of a place that's really interesting to visit.
It is kind of remarkable, and I've gotten a chance to kind of see a bit of Baldur's Gate, the city, as it is kind of, actualized in Baldur's Gate 3, the video game, and it's pretty remarkable to see that all come to life and have all those NPCs. What is it that you just love about Baldur's Gate in D&D in general? And are there interesting, tidbits about how this city works?
Yeah, I think Baldur's Gate has a lot of novelty, and that's what I really appreciate. First of all, it's a coastal city, so it has sort of a coastal city quality to it. There's a metropolitan nature to it, so you never know what you're going to encounter in the city. But a thing I really love about it is it's sort of inherently dangerous. So the city is stratified in a way. There's the upper city where the rich patriarchs dwell, and it's sort of very clean, well-patrolled, upkept, tall walls to keep out the dregs of the city who sort of congregate in the lower part of the city by the river, which is crowded and busy and prosperous, but a little dangerous and, shall we say, a little uncontrolled. And the divide between the city is stark. And so you can really sort of tell two kinds of stories. The intrigue of the merchant princes and the nobles, and then the perils of life in the back alleys down by the river. But even more fun is that the city is basically overseen by 4 dukes who have basically ceded military control to a mercenary band. So mercenaries are basically patrolling the city, and this group of mercenaries is called the Flaming Fist.
Right.
They're not all nice people.
Yeah.
And so the people who are charged with defending the city against attacks from outside are also, to some extent, a threat to the people inside, because they're kind of self-serving and they're out for basically money and profit.
What can people expect in Baldur's Gate in terms of what is the population? How many different creatures and backgrounds are you going to find?
Yeah.
Do wizards and sorcerers have much of a presence, that kind of thing?
Yeah, Baldur's Gate is one of the bigger cities that we've sort of fleshed out. And so it has a very large, diverse population. So any person who you might meet in a D&D world setting or campaign is likely to be here. Wizards, barbarians, rogues, they all come here to trade, to do business, get tied up in adventures. There's all kinds of thieves guild activity going on in the city. There's a whole undercity where dubious dealings are transpiring at all hours of the day. There's were-rats, there's doppelgangers, there's monsters in the streets sometimes. So it can be a rough and tumble place. The Gazetteer has a map of the city, a big top-down map that shows the whole lay of the land, so you get a sense of where everything is. Then there are some other maps in the Gazetteer as well that kind of show isometric cross-sections of some of the more important structures in the city, including the wonderfully designed Worms Crossing, which is the main bridge from the city across the river to the south lands. And there's like a whole community that lives on the bridge. So that's kind of a beautiful feature of the city. And there's other places too, like there are, I wouldn't call them slums, but there are smaller towns built up around the outside of the city. And those are fleshed out as well. And those can be fascinating locations to explore. For instance, there's a sort of a walled encampment called Little Kalimshan, which is where a bunch of folks gather, and you can get sort of a bit of a cultural shift from what you see in the city. And that's kind of creates or reinforces the variety that is present in the wonderfully dangerous city of Baldur's Gate.
What's in the Undercity?
So there are merchants and there are markets where you can buy just about anything you can imagine. There's also crime and kingpins who have basically carved out domains for themselves. And they're all members of the same organization, the guild, but they enjoy a great deal of autonomy. The only thing they have to watch out for is they do have to pay deference to their supreme leader, who is an enigmatic figure named Nine Fingers Keen. And she is discussed and presented in the Gazetteer as one of the sort of important NPCs of the city.
And the Gazetteer outlines these organizations, these NPCs.
Yes.
You've also got a pretty expensive map as well for Baldur's Gate in there as well.
Yeah, highly detailed map. It basically identifies all the major features that are then talked about in the Gazetteer. And the features are not only places of importance. There's a huge temple of Gond, who is the god of invention. There's all sorts of inventions to discover within that temple. But there's also places like the Low Lantern, which is a tavern in a ship in the harbor. And you can go there if you want to risk maybe getting your pockets picked. There are a lot of locations discussed. There are also encounter tables, so that if you want to just spontaneously create encounters in the city, you can roll on a series of tables depending on where in the city you are.
So the Gazetteer goes into a lot of other things as well as, like the government, like you mentioned, crime, but we also have the Dead Three.
The Dead Three are three deities, evil deities, who were killed a while back. But their religion survived. In Baldur's Gate particularly, there are a number of individuals who worship the Dead Three. And so this kind of cult has arisen in the city, made up of worshippers of these three gods, who are doing their utmost to either resurrect the gods through their sheer belief that the gods exist and will, one day come back, or simply executing on the gods' orders. And the three gods are Bane, who is sort of a god of tyranny, Baal, who is a god of murder, and Merkel, who is a god of death and the dead. And so they're not a happy combination. Let's put it that way. But they can serve as a menace to anybody who comes to the city, could be threatened by Dead Three cultists, essentially.
Right.
Of particular danger in Baldur's Gate, and this is somewhat unique to Baldur's Gate, is before he died, Baal, the god of murder, sired a number of mortal offspring, in the belief that should he be killed, they would rise up and essentially find a way to bring him back. They're known as Baal spawn, and they have slivers of Baal's power. So they're actually quite powerful individuals. Unfortunately for Baal, maybe fortunately for Baldur's Gate, when you're the sire of a god of murder, your urge to kill other sires of the god of murder is pretty high.
Right.
So the Baal spawn were actually killing each other off, and that sort of thinned their number. But there's always the concern in the city that there's one or two still lingering around who could really be out to do what their divine father set them to do, and their plots could harm folks in the city and be a bane to adventurers.
There's also information for players if they want to start out in Baldur's Gate, using backgrounds, how to tie those into the city itself.
That's correct. So if you are a player and you're in a campaign where you're going to basically be starting or going to Baldur's Gate, you have the option of saying, talking to your DM and saying, can I bake my background information more into the city? Can I say my character is from Baldur's Gate? And what the Gazetteer does is it takes backgrounds that are in the player's handbook that marry well to Baldur's Gate, like, for instance, the criminal background or the folk hero background,
Right.
and walks you through how to make those backgrounds feel more Baldur's Gatean, and gives you new ways to customize those backgrounds so you could be a criminal from Baldur's Gate or a folk hero from Baldur's Gate. There's also one new background they call the Faceless. That's an option that's available that's sort of tailor-made for Baldur's Gate.
Perfect.
You're just one of the faceless people in the mass crowds of Baldur's Gate. That's who you are, and the background
But
helps.
not literally. You have a face.
You have a face, but it's a forgettable one.
Perfect. The Colin Robinson from What We Do in the Shadows.
Yeah.
Do you have any like real quick hit advice for anyone who's just played Baldur's Gate 3 and is inspired to start their own D&D campaign or become a player for the first time? Because that game, when I played it, it's remarkably close to 5th edition D&D, down to the subclasses, the action economy, all of it. So people are probably going to look for their next adventure. What's your advice for hopping in?
My advice is, take a look at the Gazetteer and see if there's anything that sort of magnetizes you and gets the creative juices flowing. Like if the idea of kingpins in the Undercity seems like a great hook, then there's information there that will sort of help you get started. But then I would also say, the Gazetteer was really sort of designed as an idea generator for stories. But you can make Baldur's Gate your Baldur's Gate by adding elements as you see fit.
Why is Baldur's Gate such a popular D&D city? And this is such a great way for someone who is curious about D&D, who just played Baldur's Gate 3, the video game, to jump into the city. They should be, in theory, very familiar with kind of the layout of the city and kind of the vibe of it by then. So if they're looking to like jump into D&D for the first time, this is probably a good first environment for them to hop into.
Yeah, I think that Baldur's Gate lends itself well as a great starting hub because it's so easy to grasp. It's got inherent danger, and there's sort of it's very clear who the good guys and the bad guys are in most cases.
Right.